Hey everyone, it's Emily. Welcome back on my channel. Today's video is going to be my January wrap-up. I wanted to talk about the books that I have read this month, and number-wise it's actually been a really good month, but rating-wise it was a little bit all over the place. But if I think about the goals that I had given myself in the beginning of the year, I ended up doing pretty well because I had read one classic last year and I read way more than one already just this month, and I had wanted to focus on books because last year 3/4 of the books that I've read were between 300 and 500 pages, and this month I've read quite a few shorter books that I had been neglecting, and then some bigger ones too, so not too bad. The first book I'm going to be talking about is Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon McGuire, and I feel like everyone has been talking about this book on BookTube, and I was excited to read it because everyone kept mentioning that it was basically about like kids that whenever they come back from a place like Narnia, this is basically a school that helps them get back to normal, but it was so much more than I expected, and there's kind of a little bit of a thriller in there, and it was so much fun, and characters were super diverse, and I found the story very interesting. It was short. I feel like I wanted more from it, but that's kind of something that happens very often in shorter books. Sometimes they're done super well and like that's basically everything you wanted in a like super condensed format, but this one I felt like was a little bit lacking of some things, but I was really happy. As soon as I finished it, I went on Goodreads and realized it's actually going to be a trilogy. So I will continue the trilogy for sure. I ended up giving it, I believe, a 3.75, which is still really, really good for me. Anything that is over 3 stars is good, and I recommend it. Super quick read. You can read this in a day easily. I feel like the less you know, the better, and I cannot wait to continue and learn more about the magical world that the kids went to. So if you were interested in it, I highly recommend you check it out. One of the classics that I've read this month was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I had heard so many people mention this book, and I had been wanting to read more classics, and this one, since it's like 230 pages, I was like, oh, it's gonna be such a quick read, and it was still a fairly quick read, but I do feel like some parts did drag on quite a bit, but I really did like still the story. It actually reminded me why I used to love classics so much. I know a lot of people find them like slow paced and boring, but I used to really enjoy classic, and like I said, I only read one last year, so this was fun to go back to. You're following a young man who basically does a pact to stay young and beautiful forever. Basically, someone paints a picture of him, and then every time that he does something that should affect him, whether it's doing a bad action or just basically getting old, he doesn't change, but the picture does. At the time, it was very criticized and like seen as immoral and everything, but I don't think people nowadays would find this as horrifying. But it was definitely a very interesting concept, and I did enjoy it. I believe I give it a 4 stars, and I would recommend it if you were looking at it. This book really surprised me. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, and it is Thanks for Trouble by Toni Wallach. This book I feel is going to be like either something you really enjoy or something that you're like, oh, the female character is basically a manic pixie dream girl, and yeah, kinda, but at the same time there's a little bit of a twist in there that made it kind of okay with me. I had a lot of fun reading it. I even laughed a couple times, and I ended up reading this book in one day, and it is like 250 pages, 275 pages? 275 pages, and I read it in one day. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I would actually even reread it, and I don't reread books that often. It is a YA contemporary romance-ish, magical realism-ish book, and I think it is worth a read if you were looking at it. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. I gave it a 4 star, and I don't want to say too much about the story because I feel like the less you know the better, but you're following Parker Sante, who he hasn't been speaking for 5 years, and he likes to skip school, and one day he's in a hotel restaurant, and then he sees Zelda, the girl, and things happen. Basically. So you know how I said that I had been wanting to read more classic this year, and I thought this way would have been like a fascinating, so fun way of doing it, and no. I read A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, but obviously this is the graphic novel version, which is really short, and I thought that would be such a brilliant idea to actually try the classic in a graphic novel version. It's super quick. It takes you like an hour or 2 to read it, and then you can decide, you know what, I really enjoyed it and I want to know more and just read the full-length classic. And no, this was such a fail. I didn't give last year not even one 1-star book review. This is my first one. It was such a fail. I didn't even like the graphics. Like, that could have been like the redemption points, but I didn't like the graphics. The story was so confusing. I still have absolutely no idea what the story is about, and I know some people actually really don't like this classic, but I still have no idea what it is. It was super confusing. I couldn't even remember which characters what was who. I have no idea of the overall plot. None whatsoever. So give it a 1 star. I do not recommend. If you were looking at it, I would suggest to go ahead and read reviews. They are very, 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 very low, and I just don't recommend it. And I wish I could get back that hour and the money I spent on it, because one book that I had been wanting to read so bad but didn't fully live up to my expectation. It's kind of a classic sci-fi book, and it is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. And a lot of people will know this book from the movie, which is Blade Runner, and you're basically following a detective that is trying to find androids that are basically escaping Mars, where most humans are. And then I feel like I can't say too much about it, but basically it's a type of book that I really liked the idea more than I ended up enjoying to read. So the idea is fascinating. Androids that are trying to hide as humans, and just basically anything that is sci-fi, I'm all for it, but I didn't enjoy myself as much as I thought I would, and I'm glad I did read it, but it was just okay. I didn't love it. This little novella was such an interesting read, and it is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This book is the shortest book I've read, I think, ever, and has 90 pages. And even though I didn't 100% love it, it was definitely the most unique and creative book that I've read in a long time. The ideas behind it and just overall creativity was just impressive. So you're basically following Binti, and she's the first of the Imba people to be sent to this university in space. So basically it is a sci-fi. I don't want to say anything else because anything else would be basically a spoiler since it is so short. But even though I didn't love everything in it, I don't know, it was just so creative and unique. I feel like it was like missing some meat around the story, even though the ideas were good, basically. After reading it, I did find out again that there is, I believe, a trilogy, so I will definitely continue if I am able to find the other book. Next book is something that everyone has been reading. There is the movie coming out in June, and let me just show you. It is The Gunslinger by Stephen King, which is basically the first book in the Dark Tower series, and I have actually a really nice edition that has some pictures, which, FYI, the pictures are not at the right place. So the picture was basically either a little too late or a little too early, so that was a little weird. But this book that is like 200 and, I don't know, like 30 pages, it took me so long to read it, and I did not like it. This was so incredibly confusing, and I feel like this book would not be this popular if it wasn't for Stephen King's name on it, literally. I understand that it was one of his first books, and that he was, what, like 18 or something, and basically this book is like 35 years old, and I don't know, the story wasn't really good. I didn't understand much of it. The writing, I really, really didn't like the writing. It definitely felt like someone was trying really hard to like put more meaning than really there is in there, and then just the amount of like adverbs in there, and the writing was just not for me. The story was kind of a fantasy cowboy-ish story, which I have no issue with, but I don't know, it was just incredibly confusing. Basically, I had been warned that the first book was not the best one in the series, but even knowing that, I am like not in a rush to continue. And I know people say that the rest will compensate for it, but basically that's my reaction from this book. It's just, what was that? Next book I read was The Thief by Megan Welland Turner. This is a fantasy series that I did actually purchase the rest, so I am planning on continuing. And the premise really intrigued me. In the back, the first thing they say is like, I can steal anything. Basically, you're following a thief that is brought out of prison because he claimed that he can steal anything, and then basically the kingdom needs him to steal something. And I like the idea, and again, I did expect more from it, but at the same time, there is some little bits that did surprise me, so I am intrigued enough to continue. I feel like there was a little bit of something that was missing, but I am intrigued enough to continue, which I will be doing at one point. The last short book that I have read this month was The Giver by Louise Laurie, and this was a reread for me, if you can even say a reread, because this is one of the first books that I've read in English. I went in high school, I didn't speak English whatsoever, but I did take strong English because I wanted to be able to take another class, basically biology, in my last year of high school. So I didn't understand anything. I read it because I had to, and I knew barely anything from the story. And back in the day, there was not the movie, which I still haven't watched. I need to do that, but I obviously understood a lot more than I did back in the day, and it was fun. It was actually a short read, like there's like 180 pages, so I was able to read this in a day. It was fun, better than I remember, not that I remembered much, but definitely intriguing, a great way to read a classic. Now, the bigger books that I've read this month. The first one is a dystopian, even though I feel like lately it seems a little too close to reality. And it is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and again, this is one of those books that I liked the idea and the messages more than I actually enjoyed the read. Dystopian society where basically some women are simply used to reproduce, not that the other ones have it better, but yeah. So like I said, a little too close to reality lately, and it was definitely interesting, very terrifying because you could actually see this happening, and I have been told that Margaret Atwood is really good at making those dystopian society where things are not that far-fetched, so I will definitely read more of her books. It wasn't a quick read, it wasn't something that I couldn't put down, but I definitely enjoyed the ideas and the messages. This month, I finished the Mistborn trilogy, so this is the third one, The Hero of Ages by obviously Brandon Sanderson, and I'm really excited. I finally finished a series. One of my goals this year was to actually finish some series because I keep starting some and not finishing them, and oh my. I already knew Brandon Sanderson was good at finale in books. I feel like in the two of the ones that I've read, the ending was always the best part. Sometimes like the beginning of the first book is a little slow paced, but then at the end there's like a huge oh my god. And it's basically like that in each and every single one of his books, and this one was the best one. The ending was intense, and I didn't love everything. If you have read it, you probably kind of know already what I mean by that. But I really enjoy how like everything ended up tying in at the end. It was just all making sense, and I feel like very often books just keep it too open or just don't explain things that you need an explanation for, but everything was explained and it was just so good. So easily at 5 stars, absolutely loved it. I will definitely continue reading his books, and I do want to continue the Mistborn series. This was the first trilogy, and basically the rest happens like 200 years I believe later. So I'll definitely continue at one point, but really enjoyed it. Cannot stress enough, if you like fantasy, you need to read Brandon Sanderson's book. This book is mentioned quite often on BookTube, and I wanted to read it for myself, and it is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I didn't know what to expect because I feel like sometimes on BookTube, something that is really popular, I will either love it or really not love it. And this one I actually did enjoy it. I do feel like I didn't love it as much as other people did. It was definitely a slow-paced kind of family dynamic and friendship book. There is some diversity in there too. It was kind of a slow burn, slow-paced, interesting book, and it was really enjoyable. I'll give it a 4 stars. I really liked it, and I definitely recommend it. I don't want to say too much because it isn't that big, and I feel like a lot of it is conversation, so the least you know, the better. Last but not least, another big book that I read this month has been Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. And it is my first time reading them in English. Is it a reread or not whenever you're reading it in a different language? I feel like it is not a rereading. It's my first time reading it. Anyway, I had a lot of fun. It is definitely one of my favorite one of the series. I believe my favorite one is the 6th one, but this one is definitely where things get very action-packed, a little bit more dark, and I really enjoyed it. And I watched a movie not that long ago, and I liked looking at differences. I did read Harry Potter so many times as a teenager in French, and I feel like my perspective changed quite a bit now that I'm a little older. I feel like some things that, you know, you always saw, for example, as Snape being not so nice person, but I feel like he's so much of a dick. I feel like a lot of people have forgotten a lot of the things that he has done and keep focusing on the always. But in this book, he was so mean to Hermione with her teeth, and oh, a lot more happened in here that I didn't remember. So those are all the books that I have read this month. If you have read any of those and you have any opinions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below so we can talk about them. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss any future videos, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.